The Alberta government is under fire after a sexist and racist essay won third place in what's called the Her Vision Inspires contest co-sponsored by the legislature. The author, only identified as S. Silver, states that women are not equal to men and says that women who give birth to more than 2 kids should receive medals and financial incentives. While it is sadly popular nowadays to think that the world would be better off without humans or that Albertan children are unnecessary as we can import foreigners to replace ourselves, this is a sickly mentality that amounts to a drive for cultural suicide, Silver writes. Women's Issues Associate Minister Jackie Armstrong-Homeniuk initially said the essay shouldn't have been chosen, but after backlash from her own colleagues, she issued a second statement apologizing. It's clear that the process failed, and I apologize for my role in that, she said. The selection of this particular essay and awarding it with third prize was a failure on my part as the head of the judging panel. The Power Panel is back to talk about this. Nigan, Amanda, Tim, and Kathleen. And joining us for this discussion, Calgary Herald columnist Don Braid. Don, I was telling you in the break, I was kind of glued to your updates about this over the past few days. That second statement the statement from the minister, associate minister, kind of explains what the big brouhaha was, which is that she actually helped pick the winner.
Well, yes, it's astonishing to me that actual conscious politicians who aren't actually asleep could be aware of this and read it and somehow think it was worth a prize. It's simply stunning. You know, there's been uproar after uproar with the UCP, but there hadn't been anything this week, so they had to do something, right? So here we are. So NDP MLA Janice Irwin is poking around on the Assembly website and finds this thing, which has been sitting there for about 10 days with nobody noticing, and she made it public, and it just took off like a rocket. Now, you know, this province, which you know, Vesey, I mean, we've had 2 elected female premiers. We're going to have another female premier soon. There are probably 2 female leaders fighting for the election premier's job next year. It's not as if this province is against women. The reaction to this is not even drawing out of the woodwork the conspiracy theorists and the people who really think that way. It's almost universally negative against what this young person has said. And I think it's almost a cruelty to this person, whoever she is, to make it public. And I hope she isn't identified publicly, frankly.
Amanda, I think like the political part of all of this is, of course, the reaction and kind of the delayed reaction from specifically the associate minister, because there were, as we pointed out in the introduction, some of her colleagues, including the speaker, who right away said, like, this does not, no way, no how. But she took a really long time to come to that point, so much so that Dawn was asking the premier's office if she was going to be fired before that statement eventually came out. Your thoughts?
Yes, and she's the associate minister for the status of women. Like, it's so disturbing. This entire essay series was called Her Vision Inspires, and the only thing that this essay, as we've been, as it's been revealed, could inspire is a new chapter in The Handmaid's Tale. Like, it was shocking for those viewers who haven't read it or seen it. She talked about things like equating immigration to cultural suicide, that women are not equal to men, rewarding women for their reproductive services. Like, either this MLA simply didn't read it, which one would hope is the actual outcome, but then we're awarding things by government-sponsored awards to individuals in the province without actually doing the job of reading the thing that you're sponsoring, or they actually felt like this deserved the award. Either way, this is unconscionable. So, yeah, it's not surprising to me that people are, sort of calling for her head at this point. And I agree with what Don said about the author of this. Like, should it be revealed who this author is? It's another wave, I think, of anger that's all being directed, needs to be directed somewhere.
Nigan, again, where the government is concerned, I mean, this is as Don pointed out, they're going through a leadership race in the UCP. The premier is going to leave. There's been no shortage of controversy. And this is like, even at a time when you'd think it's the summer, there's not, nobody is necessarily focused on Premier Kenney the way they used to be. And still, here we are.
Here we are. I have to say.
Oh, sorry, that's just to Nigan, Don. I'll get you back in a second. My apologies.
Okay, sorry. Sorry.
No problem, Don. This looks like a political situation where you've got a chicken with its head cut off, because it's really just running in a circle and just disaster after disaster looking at the US UCP. Now, the 19th century historian in me, which is the research that I do, that the time period in which essays was actually all anyone ever talked about because there was no TV, does have a moment here in which I feel particularly pleased that we're all talking about an essay. But of course, this essay, when I first read it, reminded me a lot of satire before anything else, more like, but it's also reminding of the fact that we do live in a world in which we see the Supreme Court reverse Roe versus Wade and to turn back the clock on women's rights. I mean, there is an alarming trend in the mainstream which is seeking to turn back rights for women. And I think it's reaching into many corners, sometimes into the population of youth and those who want to have a large political footprint. This isn't just a fringe point. This is someone who took it upon themselves to submit this for an essay competition. And then, of course, that this essay competition proposes to give a diversity of women's viewpoints. And I guess the fact is that this might just be a viewpoint within a large segment of women. We have to remember that there's a very large segment of women that does support the reverse of Roe versus Wade and so on. And so this is the question really to ask ourselves, is that what's the trend happening in society, and then in the bigger aims of mainstream political parties that seem to be fostering these points of view, coming up to the point where women are outright saying things that are just antithetical to women's rights.
I think, Kathleen, that's why there was such a focus on the government's reaction, and the NDP came out so forcefully. I'll just, the essay states that women are not equal to men and that their ability to bear children takes priority over trying to break into male-dominated careers. To Nigan's point, that's why it feels like you're reading something.
This is a regular Trump slogan, too. This is a regular Trump slogan, almost the exact same.
Kathleen?
Yeah, I think that, while we all acknowledge that the UCP, we don't know yet because we don't know the true identity of the author yet. The UCP didn't likely write this essay, but they did, award it that bronze prize. But I think that it's really important that we don't, we put this all in context, right? This is, it's not a one-off for this party, the UCP. This is the same party that basically presented a provincial curriculum that wanted to remove residential schools from the curriculum. This is the same party that actually suggested to take away the rights of LGBTQ students and staff in another education plan. So it is reminiscent or consistent pattern of the dinosaurs that are really running the UCP. So, I mean, I agree that with Don that, Albertans particularly have shown themselves willing to accept women in high levels at the premiership and in other roles of importance in that province. But this party in particular has a problem when it comes to kind of existing in the 21st century. How do you feel about that, Don?
Well, I think that there's a lot of what's be said for what's being said here, but here's what I think. Here's why it happened. There's been all this talk in conservative circles about being constantly shut up every time they open their mouth about something they believe in, some belief they get slammed down by the so-called woke crowd and all the rest of it. The language of the minister who approved this, and she did read this, she had to have read it, and she had to have known what was in it. She's taken responsibility. I understand there may have been only one other woman who was actually involved. But in her first apology, her first almost so-called apology, she talked about the value of letting everybody have their voice. So I think she may have said, yeah, this might be a little controversial, but people will say, great to bring it out because we don't want to be stomped down by the people who don't think people should have their voice. Conservatives should have their voices. So it's a case of political stupidity, naivety, and a couple of other E's. But it may have come from that kind of conservative
the base.
Tim, I think that's a good point. I think that I certainly hear that sentiment from a lot of conservatives across this country. Yeah. But this isn't just like, hey, we feel stifled, we should have free speech. This is somebody basically saying, you're importing foreigners to replace us. That is an extreme thing to say.
Yeah, thank you for saving the Tyrannosaurus Rex for last. You're welcome. Good. And yes, the language is extreme. I'm building off something Kathleen said. And Don would know this better. He's covering it every day. This creates an opportunity in a strange way for Daniel Smith, who said some kooky, wild things in the last number of weeks. if you're Danielle Smith and you do believe in people's freedom of speech, you can say, well, look, I'm glad this person had the ability to express herself, but I think it's wrong. And here's why I think it's wrong. And to Don's point earlier, I'm an example, as are the other candidates in this race, of embracing equality and leading toward and charging for it. Now, that may be a chaotic West Wing moment for me, but there is some opportunity to be had out of this, because I think you have to pull a lesson out of this, too. And it isn't just allowing controversial, inane speech to be heard. It's, all right, addressing what you believe is wrong in there, and there's a lot wrong in there. And as a politician, instead of allowing it to fester, solving it. Don't think it's going to happen, but there could be an opportunity to address what this person has written, which is wrong.
Don, I'll throw it back to you. Is that opportunity being seized?
Well, Smith had a chance to comment. In fact, I asked her people if they could drum up a comment, and she did comment. But she did not deal with the thing itself. She basically said women should be able to compete in any area and succeed in any area, and people from all over are welcome to Alberta. But she did not put down this minister or even directly refer to this minister. So she didn't actually deal with the thing itself. There are, in the leadership race, there are 7 candidates. 4 of them are females, and 3 of the others condemned it outright. And one of them, of course, was a former status of women's minister who was kicked out because she criticized Kenney. This minister is not being kicked out because they don't have any spare parts left. They've had to put so many new people into jobs because everybody's running. So it's also symptomatic of a government that's completely out of control in a lot of ways and not supervised. Kenney himself is going to be going traveling soon, and maybe that's a good thing.
Kathleen, I just have about 30 seconds left, but I know you've done work with the NDP. Do you think this is something the opposition stays on? Do you think they'll try to force that resignation?
100%. I mean, as Don pointed out, the NDP dug it up, circulated it. You've seen some of the opposition members from the NDP call it hate speech. Obviously, I think it will show a clear differentiation between the UCP and the NDP, and they'll hopefully capitalize on that.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks very much to our power panel this evening for some great discussions. Appreciate it. Kathleen Monk, Niigaan Sinclair, Don Braid, Tim Powers, and Amanda Alvaro. Right now, though, I'll hand things over to my colleague Travis Danraj at The Rundown.